Yeah, great to have you here. And the title of this panel discussion will be Cosmos versus Ethereum. But essentially, Cosmos, Ethereum, they're not really like competing each other, but they really have some similar ecosystem strategy. For like Cosmos, there have been like hundreds of L1 blockchains out there being connected into one ecosystem. For Ethereum, they're now like around like 200 rollups being built. So for this panel discussion, we're gonna talk about how Cosmos is doing and how Ethereum is doing, and how they can complement each other for their each strategies. So we have like 4 panels here, and for the Ethereum side, we have Julian from Say, and also Hart from Cross, and in the Cosmos side, we have Zaki, and also Ash from Xion. So before starting this off, would you like to introduce yourself and what you guys are building?
Sure. My name is Zaki. I have been working on interoperability for a decade. So I don't know. I built a lot of stuff. People seem to use that.
Kind of a baller intro, Zaki. I'm Zaki. I've connected things for a long time, and it's true. It's very true. So my name is Hart. I'm the co-founder of Across Protocol. In addition to UMA Protocol, another thing I work on, but we'll focus on Across today. Across is known as a bridge. We are an intent-based bridge, so we use this intent architecture to very quickly bridge assets and related messages, which maybe we can talk about, between blockchains. And I think this intent architecture really isn't a bridge. It's kind of fading in the background. It's just about how we really quickly communicate messages between chains. Across is focused on EVM chains today, at least, and we'll get into why that is and why I think that intent architecture is really needed for EVM land, but maybe not for Cosmos land. One thing that I've been yelling about this week is this standard called ERC 7683, which is kind of common order format for intents in the EVM space, and we can talk maybe about how that works too.
Hey, I'm Ash. I spent the last 15 years as a software mercenary in Silicon Valley startups, and now I'm leading technology at the Xion chain. We're basically the sin eaters of crypto. We do all the work to make the UX palatable and invisible in order to try to onboard non-technical users.
So I represent Say. For people who have been following Say and stuff, like we initially launched as a Cosmos chain, but recently we went the EVM route as well. So I think earlier this year in August, we became the first ever parallelized EVM chain, actually front-running Monad and stuff. And obviously, this entire conversation is extremely applicable in terms of like explaining our rationale in terms of why we went Ethereum instead of staying with Cosmos. But yeah, I basically run Liquidity, DeFi strategy, and grants over Say.
Yeah, so kicking the discussion off, let's firstly talk about what Ethereum is failing to do. Like for me, I think like interop is something that in the Ethereum ecosystem, it is not really addressed well. There are like a lot of rollups, and there's ecosystem, superchain, hyperchain, and Polygon aggregating layer. So they're like differently building their interop specs, but in the Cosmos ecosystem, like I haven't heard a lot of like complaints about interop. So yeah, happy to hear from Zaki about how Cosmos has been building in the interop and what kind of like unique things are out there.
So I think what Cosmos started out with was we said, hey, we're going to have an interop protocol that is heavily standardized, has lots of people eyes on it. There's no token. There's no, and it was like very easy to adopt for anyone who adopted the standard. So we got something on the order of 100 chains that use IBC. IBC comes out of the box, and because Cosmos prioritized proof of stake and fast finality, you had sort of on the order of 10 seconds to interop between blockchains. So that was a pretty reasonable user experience for 2021. That was the kind of stuff that we got right. But we immediately found there were like lots of challenges, right? for instance, like not being able to see your balance across multiple chains became a huge problem. Having to maintain and inside of the wallet switch between accounts. Like even I, who like built all of this stuff, will sometimes be like sitting there going, wait, why can't I use this app? Oh, damn it, my coins are in the wrong chain. And in Cosmos, it takes like 30 seconds to move your coins, but you kind of have to like figure that out. And like, I don't know how any ordinary person is ever gonna figure this out. So interop is really, really hard and has like so many different layers to solving the problem. And I guess like the theme has the Cosmos, like sort of the cosmosification of blockchains has always been that you can never fully avoid the interop like monster. Like the promise of the one monolithic blockchain to rule them all has always been like sort of tantalizing to the industry, but there just are these incredible forces that pull towards requiring interop that drive the demand for sovereign blockchains. And so like these challenges have to be solved by every ecosystem, and the work continues.
Yeah.
Ethereum's defense?
I want to talk a little more about like Cosmos' thought about Ethereum interop. Like for like IBC, I think it's just more than getting connected. You guys have ICA,
I think
ICQ.
I think like one of the thing that people in Cosmos look at Ethereum and say like, what the fuck are they doing over there? Is why the hell is there 20-minute finality on your blockchain when your blockchain is a hub of an interoperability network? Like these two things have created a fantastic business opportunity for Hart. But like other than that, I don't like we didn't start, the idea that like, it's like fast finality is like, and like when I talk to Ethereum Foundation people and I tell them that like you can't have unified liquidity without fast finality, it's like no one has ever told them this before. And I'm like, what the hell is going on?
It is kind of shocking. But like, look, okay, let's talk about how we backed into this, right? So Cosmos started day one being like, we are going to be a network of blockchains, right? And so put yourself in the mental model. It's like, okay, if we're going to have lots and lots of different blockchains, okay, we need to connect them. And then you get to obvious considerations. If we need to connect them, it can't take 20 minutes to send messages between them. And of course, we have Tendermint, which has like fast finality by default out of the box. And so you're starting from like such a different starting point. You're like, we have fast finality, and we know there's going to be a ton of blockchains, so we're going to connect them all with a common standard from day one and go from there. And then to Zaki's point, you do that from day one, and you still have lots of problems.
Yep.
Right? Okay, so Ethereum, you actually start with the monolithic blockchain vision. You're like, we got one chain. Great. We don't think about any of this other stuff. And our one chain has, slower finality to, well, whatever. We start with proof of stake, and we get proof of work, or other way around, you know what I mean. But you have slower finality times, and you're thinking in this monolithic world, and it's easy. Like, I did my talk at DevCon, I go through some slides where, in the old days, it was so simple. You had MetaMask, and you clicked one button, and it did the thing on one chain. And then Ethereum was like, all right, well, that's cool, but it doesn't scale. Duh, right? Now we need to scale this thing, so we're going to build all these L2s. And we build all these L2s, but we don't really think about the problems, to Zaki's point. We don't really actually look at the lessons from Cosmos. We build all these L2s, and they all have 20-minute finality times, or 7 days, depending on how you want to look at it. Like the 7-day finality time is idiotic, like truly idiotic, if you're going to try to connect all these blockchains. It's like the dumbest thing you can imagine. But okay, you got these long finality times, and you don't even think about interop from day one when you launch the rollup-centric roadmap. And what happens is Ethereum does execute on the rollup-centric roadmap. Maybe it took too long, but it's any individual L2 is fast and cheap. It's just they are super disconnected. And so you're sitting here now with the challenge of, okay, we haven't thought about this at all. We have no common standards for how to interop, which is partially what I'm trying to solve. And we have slow finality times. And so Zaki's right, it created a business opportunity for me.
Yeah, and like one of the patterns that I think Cosmos tried to seize on was new chains will spend an enormous amount of token incentives, et cetera, onboarding liquidity, onboarding new users. How do we make that like add to the whole? So like when new Cosmos chains launch, like it's actually bringing in liquidity that is like accessible to the network. We've like sort of succeeded at that, but like that was the theory, that was the attempt, and it does have things like we've seen hundreds of millions of dollars flow into Cosmos to like access DYDX, and there has been spillover. You know, the Noble USDC, which like launched to support DYDX, is now like the largest form of USDC on Say. It's the largest form of USDC on Osmosis. I think it's the largest form of USDC on Injective. Like all of that stuff is actual Cosmos network effects from having fast finality and fast interop and having follow-on effects of the go-to-markets of like multiple Cosmos chains working synergistically.
I think like interop in Ethereum is in general is kind of a mess right now, but kind of like narrowing down to the super chain. Like I actually got some grant from Optimism Labs and did some research on interop with some interop researchers, and I felt that it is really in an early stage in terms of implementing and designing interop within the super chain ecosystem. I was curious about like Hart's thought about how the interop in super chain will unfold in the next year.
Okay, so you have all these L2s launch under different roll-up ecosystems. Cool. And then they realize that interop is a problem because they didn't think about this from day one. And then they're like, okay, we got to solve this. And what you have, I think you've got a bunch of great technologies that are not, they don't cover all the L2s. They cover pockets of them. So we're going to figure out how to connect the superchains by sharing vault proofs, and we can have better interoperability that way. Actually a hard thing to do, hard thing to back into, but you can kind of put a lot of effort and energy into doing that. So you can imagine that the superchain becomes one relatively connected island, and then you can imagine Polygon's ag layer is another connected island, and Arbitrum chain clusters are another connected island, and like yada yada yada, right? I actually think that's kind of cool, but then you take Vitalik's perspective or the Ethereum's Foundation's perspective, and you haven't unified Ethereum. You have now a handful of islands that are not connected. And so I still think, and we've got to let the other panelists go, but I think this intent architecture is this other like thin layer of abstraction that can kind of connect between these islands and can kind of seamlessly upgrade with other interop techniques. Yeah, a lot more I can say on that too.
I also have had an incredibly miserable time trying to convince anyone in Cosmos about the value of intents. It has taken forever. I've been like shilling intents in Cosmos for 2 years, and they didn't get it until recently.
Okay, so can I shill intents for 2 seconds about what are we trying to do here? So you have chain A and chain B. The observation here is what I really want to do. 95% of what I want to do is moving value, or maybe it's moving value to execute an action on the destination chain. So core insight, value is fungible. Like I don't care whose dollars it is. I just want dollars on the destination chain. So if somebody sends me the money on the destination chain, I don't need to send a message between these two blockchains. I can shortcut messaging, and I can actually if that person will take on finality risk, I can shortcut finality too. So the intent idea is I express what I want to do on chain A, and I lock up my money, like basically escrow my money on chain A, and I have a network of third-party people that are going to go compete and fill me on chain B with their own money. They like make me a loan, and maybe they execute a transaction on the destination chain too, and they can fill me really quick. So like in a cross, even though L2s have 20-minute finality, our median fill time L2 to L2 is 3 seconds right now. So they fill me quickly, user's happy, they move on with their day, and then the protocol verifies that the fill did happen before they release the user funds back to the solver. And that can take 20 minutes or 2 hours. We have now time to figure out how to verify those fills via messages. And so the intent architecture just shortcuts this finality and chain intent thing. So I want to say that, but I'll stop talking now.
Yeah, it'll be great to see, like, I see a lot of team building solver infra, so hope to see like interop problems are more better solved next year. And kind of like moving on to the next question, like in terms of like what Ethereum is failing to do is I think rollup customization, because Cosmos has been doing a lot of experiments on building their like kind of purpose built and really directional infra. But for like most of the rollups, there are like a lot of like general rollups out there. So I was curious. I have a question to Ash. Like Xion has been building a custom blockchain for trying to abstract the experience for users. So what kind of like customization did Xion did, and will there be like lessons for Ethereum rollups to take?
You know, we like to think that Ethereum account abstraction was because of us, but that's absolutely not true. But those are the things that we've been able to take advantage of, right? Like, it'll take Ethereum years, if ever, for account abstraction to have any realistic integration with like the products and the developers that exist on Ethereum. It's too big a ship, and there's too many parties involved with the design of the protocol. We could ship it in a month. And same thing, like we do fee inversion. So instead of users paying their fees, applications pay their fees on behalf of their users. That would be technically possible in Ethereum with paymasters and all of these tools. It would be a huge pain in the ass. So those are things that these smaller purpose-built chains are capable of doing. And then to follow on some short thoughts on the previous things, it is funny that often the nicest way to go from one EVM to another is via a Cosmos chain. Like, that says a lot about the EVM infrastructure in general. And I will probably be the only person in Thailand right now who will say, I don't think intents matter that much. I think that they are overvalued. They are just another tool for people that are building DeFi, for other people that are building DeFi. Like, we are in a unique position because most of our users are non-technical, and we're not trying to be an L1 that's going to win it all, which means we have to be very forward with stuff like chain abstraction, which means most of our cross-chain calls are not value transfers. They are intended transactions on other chains to do anything. So if intents can't solve something basic like value transfers, they sure as hell cannot solve something like general message passing. So I'd be surprised if like intents were something that were valuable to us in 5 years.
Yeah, I'll take a bet on that. But we are solving value transfer, just to step back for a second. Like, intents do solve quick value transfer between EVM chains.
Then why are half of the talks at this conference about how intents have not been solved and like we're still working on it?
I don't know if we're still working on it. Go use a cross. You guys go to a cross.2 and bridge between L2s. Take you 3 seconds. It works pretty beautifully.
Yeah, we have effectively a 7683 for Cosmos widely coming out. And like, I don't know. It's in audits right now.
Yeah, since you're talking about customization in the app chain, like, is there anything like customized and built in Sommelier in terms of like maybe intent module?
So I think Sommelier was early to this idea that I think we're probably I think we're going to start seeing more and more of. As usual, I started building something about 5 years too early. Effectively what Sommelier is a form of like long-running intent, where it's like I express the desire for more yield, and like a strategist comes in and solves this for me by like figuring out what DeFi protocols, what things to do to achieve the target yield. I think we're going to see a lot more long-running intent protocols, like the like life cycle of an intent on a cross is 6 seconds, something like that. Maybe a little bit longer to finally get for final settlement, but it's pretty fast. Whereas I think we will also see intents that run on the order of days, weeks, years on behalf of users, and I think that's going to also be a big part of the sort of improved DeFi ecosystem.
Hart, do you see any like interesting rollups out there in Ethereum?
Yeah, like you kind of asked the question earlier about like, so Cosmos chains get super customized, while maintaining generally like this fast finality time and IBC to connect them. I do think you see sort of 2 trends in rollups. You see one trend in the optimism superchain kind of ecosystem, which is we're going to keep them very standard issue for the most part. And then I think actually more on like the other side is like Arbitrum Orbit chains are getting quite customized, quite customizable and can kind of do your own thing within this common framework. And so I don't know, like, I mean, maybe this is a counterexample. Unichain is hacking OP stack to divide like a 2-second block into 8 250 millisecond blocks, and they're going to run the sequencer inside in TE and like include other kind of ordering rules, which I think is kind of cool. But I do think we're seeing a pretty like increasing diversification around how these different L2s work. And I think that's good, provided that all of that customization takes into account interoperability as well, and they don't like start doing funky things that make them really hard to connect to these other chains.
Yeah, kind of like adding my thought, and is that like I recently saw a roller called Kinto, and they have their account abstraction natively integrated, and all the accounts are smart account, and all the accounts are connected to rollups by circuit protocol. So that kind of like customization seems to be really interesting in the rollup ecosystem. And kind of like moving away to what kind of Cosmos is failing to do, like I feel like in terms of like Cosmos SDK framework, there's no like strong leadership. So there seems to be like independent team developing it. So there seems to be like kind of breaking changes a lot. For example, like recently, there was a bug which wasn't updated in the Terra ecosystem. So there was some like a lot of like Astra tokens hacked, and then it was exploited in the Neutron blockchain. So what kind of like steps would Cosmos SDK needs to do?
I mean, this future of customized OP stack and Arbitrum stack things is just like you are going to inherit all over the problems of Cosmos. Because like, yeah, you're going to be like, this chain, this is OP stack version, blah, 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 and this chain is OP stack version, blah, blah, blah. This is a fork of that, you know, and like it becomes this like complicated tree, and it does provide, it's a lot of mental state for developers to keep in their minds. Like, I mean, like during this conference, like, I don't know, 2 nights ago, there were like a whole bunch of Cosmos chains upgrading and like a whole bunch of things broke, and like, so I don't know, it's just life. Like, I don't think there's any magical solution, and I think like this idea that like, oh, like we fixed a security bug and then like the dev accidentally reverted the fix and then it got exploited. Just, this is going to be life. This is going to be life. There's going to be security bugs. You know, Ethereum like tried to keep the trusted compute base of ETH L2s to be very small by like reusing as much code from Geth as possible, but that traps you in the like sort of state of the ETH L1, which, you know, everyone has been unhappy with. So now everyone wants, you know, faster block times. They want higher gas limits. They want account abstraction. They want EIPs that aren't in the base layer. They want all of these things. Great. Now you have a much more complicated trusted compute base, and things will go wrong. Welcome to hell.
Kind of like hearing more thoughts from Julian from Say Network. I feel like Say has been the blockchain that has really customized Cosmos SDK well. Like when you guys were building, did you take some lessons or like tools from other like Cosmos blockchains, or did you guys just build on your own?
Well, I think to the rest of everyone's point, I think what Cosmos is really good at is really just being a layer of infrastructure. So for Say, when we built out our chain, obviously Cosmos was, you know, the #1 thing we went to because of that greater degree of customization and stuff. But like as I mentioned at the start during my introduction as well, we recently went EVM for like several of those issues, right? I think the biggest issue with Cosmos is that it doesn't capture value. The tokenomics of Cosmos, the way it's being structured, is just it basically goes against the fact of what Ethereum is, which is basically capturing value for the base chain for all these other chains, right? So if you look at like all these chains, upcoming chains like Monad, Parachain, Mega ETH, and all that kind of stuff, they're all parallelized EVM, right? Because at the end of the day, by being just pure Cosmos, it just really it's impossible for you guys to really capture value on the chain at all because of all these interoperability and all that kind of stuff. But don't get me wrong, right? Like Noble USDC is obviously a very, very great example, right? In terms of what interoperability, fast finality, customization can actually bring, right? So I think like going into the future, I don't think it's going to be like a Cosmos versus Ethereum. We will see more of these kind of parallelized chains really start to pop up, having the best of what Ethereum can actually bring to the table, as well as having the best of what Cosmos can bring to the table, right? Obviously, with IBC, there's a lot of customization issues as well. It's great when you're launching a chain, but it's not actually great when you're trying to make changes to the chain after the chain's being live.
Yeah, I was also gonna wanted to have discussion about the L1 and L2 tokenomics out there. Like Cosmos, there are like hundreds of blockchains, and for L2s, there are a lot of rollups coming out with their own tokens. And I feel like there are a lot of experiments in the L2 tokenomics. So how do you think, like, in the birth ecosystem for Cosmos, how could you guys do better to build like better utilities for L1 tokens?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, we have done a terrible job of this. We've done a terrible job of this. Our theories as to like what value accrual, how to get distribution, how to accrue value to tokens have all largely not panned out. I think has been like a huge challenge for us in our huge ecosystem. I think like the design space of like what should you do. I think we also, I mean, for a while the L2 tokens were like massively outperforming Cosmos tokens, and everyone was like, you know, why be a Cosmos token? You could be an L2 token, and you know. Last cycle, Cosmos tokens did well. Then everyone started to hate them. But now everything is converging because like the L2 tokens are down only too. Because like people want non-commodity infrastructure. People want this, you know, there's still this idea of infinite possibility if you have an application layer where people are building lots of different apps on top of. Whereas, you know, if you know, everyone can just easily pop, like, and apps can easily hop from blockchain to blockchain, it becomes really hard. We're seeing lots of new experiments. We have like Thorchain's app layer launching soon. We have, you know, the Osmosis team is now focusing on something that is like more abstract than even one chain. But like, yes, this problem is hard. I think we do have a lot of skepticism towards like why the Cosmos ecosystem has always been a little bit skeptical of just sort of following in the footsteps of EVM. But at the same time, we've done a bad job of like providing something that does well for the needs of EVM builders. Like the Says of the world and the Injectives of the world have had to like invent like way too much because we haven't met that market really well. It's been a huge challenge.
Yes, in the past, like I also feel that customers have failed in terms of building good tokenomics. But I feel that we recently wrote a paper about changing landscape of L1 tokenomics, where like projects like Chain and Initia and also Injective, like their burn auction, they're kind of like experimenting with a lot of things in the L1 tokenomics. How do you see that kind of experiments?
Incredibly valuable, lots to learn from. I also think like one of the things that was really powerful about Cosmos is the Cosmos staking experience was something that was like very widely distributed early. Lots of exchanges, lots of wallets, all supported staking Cosmos tokens. And so when staking was like hot and novel, Cosmos was doing really well. But the problem was most of those wallets didn't integrate any sort of app layer experience. And it's been really hard to get distribution of the app layer experience of Cosmos. And we haven't been able to take the distribution. So like, you know, like Coinbase will support staking Atom and other Cosmos tokens, TIA, Injective, et cetera. But what it doesn't give you any way of using the chains. Whereas because the EVM experience world started out proof of work and then built zero distribution around their staking, everything that got distributed was actually app layer stuff. It's hard to like fix all of that path dependency, but it's been a challenge.
What Cosmos blockchain do you think has successfully built the app layer?
DYDX?
I mean, if the Cosmos thesis is app chains, like the app chain that like the most success, the like biggest app chain in Cosmos is DYDX, and it's the biggest validation of the thesis. And like Cosmos has struggled because we believed in this app chain thesis, not in the general purpose L1 thesis. So there are many general purpose L1s built in Cosmos. The application, like the kinds of applications that even justify having an app chain have moved along relatively slowly and really only focused around perp dexes.
Yeah, and actually, I think in Ethereum land, the same is kind of true too. Like the L2s that are successful are general purpose L2s right now. That's not to say there aren't some like promising signs of L2 app chains. Like Zora minting has actually gone up a ton recently. I think like proof of play, and there's some games that I actually am not much of a gamer and I haven't played. But generally speaking, when you think of Ethereum L2s, the ones that are successful, you think of big general purpose chains, which is not the thesis. The thesis is you're going to have like app chains too, or at least that's.
And you have this problem when you have a network of general purpose chains, which is they all cannibalize each other. Like
Totally at war. Yeah.
right? Like in theory, Arbitrum and Optimism are like trying to pull people off of ETH L1, but like that has mostly plateaued and it has for a long time. And now mostly they just cannibalize each other's liquidity and they cannibalize each other's user bases. And it is a kind of it has this like familiar aspect from Cosmos' point of view, where like app developers are like, I launch on Osmosis, I launch on Optimism, I launch on Arbitrum, I launch on Base. I get like relatively few incremental users. Our users show up to like farm the incentives from each one, and like nothing really unique and differentiated. And you see a lot of app developers who are very excited about launching on something like Barachain, where you have completely new tokenomics, completely new incentive design that may or may not work, but like if it works, it will be huge.
But Zaki, just on that for a second. So I do think where the L2s are pulling in new users are like the exchange L2s. So like Base is pulling in Coinbase users. I think Kraken's Inc. will pull in Kraken users. You know, yep. OKX's chain will pull in OKX users. Great. But what we don't yet have, at least at huge scale, is an app chain that pulls in normie users that are not coming in through like a crypto exchange.
Absolutely.
Do you see any like interesting L2s that are trying new approaches in terms of pulling users from different base? Maybe Zora?
Yeah, I mean, okay, Blast also has a new approach where they're going to be like pay more yield out, right? Kind of interesting, like financial incentives to come to my L2. And then Zora is really trying to be the app chain thing. They're just like, hey, I have NFTs here. They don't really want you to even think about the chain. I think they really are looking at it as like an application that does have an app chain or blockchain underneath. And there are still, like that is the dream of what we're trying to build, right? It's like applications, there's Web3 applications that users don't even really realize they're using a blockchain. There's not that many examples of that yet.
Maybe asking a question to Ash, like Xion, you guys have different user base. I feel that you guys are working with like Baskin Robbins and the Web2 companies to help like users on board blockchain and get more incentive. Like, what kind of strategies are you taking for now?
That is a broad question. We are basically approaching this, software mercenary historically from a marketing and product development standpoint, right? Crypto is basically the only industry where that lesson that was learned 100 times over everywhere else in software, that tech for tech's sake isn't valuable, seems to have been like forgotten. So to us, every feature we have to add to our chain, every modification, it needs to be towards some product feature. It needs to be for user experience. It needs to get another million people on. Otherwise, what's the point? So we kind of switched the way we approach development. Like we will take as much off the shelf or bought as we can, right? We didn't want to build any of the things we built. They just weren't there. So we had to build them for this overarching goal of user acquisition and engagement.
Kind of like summing up this overall discussion, is there something that you guys are really looking ahead in the next year?
So part of the issue we've had is like trying to get non-technical applications is like the question of why do you need a blockchain, right? And it's a hard one to answer, right? If someone had answered that effectively, we'd see huge consumer applications. Like Polymarket's probably the one with the widest knowledge at this point. Where I'm excited is interacting with zero knowledge tools teams, because they're working on things that are starting to kind of bridge the gap between like things that take value from on-chain attestations, on-chain proofs, like the ability to selectively release information, because that lets you tie into stuff like social applications or like community management or non-financial voting. Like those things are cool, and they seem like how we will be able to kind of bring applications that benefit from a blockchain to mass consumers.
Okay, let me try to do a little rah-rah, like let's go crypto thing here too. But I'm actually kind of serious about this. So what do we have now that we didn't have, a couple years ago? I mean, maybe you could argue Cosmos had this earlier, but we have really cheap block space. We have really cheap block space. We have a lot of it. It is fragmented. It's on these different chains. And we have the ability to send money, or a form of money, send some sort of payment really cheaply within a chain very quickly. And then, let's say we figure out, I'm going to say intense, figure out how we send money between blockchains, whatever, but we figure that out. My bear case for crypto is that we reinvent financial rails, like all these shitty financial rails that charge 2% or take forever. And I worked in TradFi and back office settlement functions. This is all this crap that is literally a tax on human productivity that can be solved by technology, by these blockchains, to give us better financial rails. Now, if you give ourselves better financial rails and we actually have fractions of a penny transaction fees to move money between things, we invent cool shit. It's just going to happen, right? You're going to figure out ways that people now do micropayments, and I think you could do the crypto XAI thing, but now all of a sudden you want to use some API, you don't need an API key that you have to go sign up for or whatever else. You can just make a micropayment to some service to get access to your AI model or whatever else you have. I don't want to do the AIX crypto thing, but the point is really, really cheap payments with really, really cheap compute on all this block space means you can build very interesting things. And I do think that if you just baseline think of this payments network of sending payments back and forth across all this cheap block space really quickly, that's pretty exciting, pretty bullish. And small shell, because I think across and the intent thing can make that be fast and cheap. But I don't know. I think there's a lot to be excited about there.
Yeah, basically we do have a killer app for the non-Western world in crypto, which is stablecoins. And I think stablecoins are going to be orders of magnitude better at the end of 2025. And one of the things that I've tracked very closely this year is seeing stablecoin issuance decouple from trading volumes. So the relationship between centralized exchange trading volumes and the amount of stablecoins that were outstanding has basically been fixed for the entire time I've been in crypto. And this is the first year where we saw a situation in which stablecoins continued to grow and trading volumes were flat, which I thought was I think is a really key demonstration of something outside of purely stablecoins are your casino chips use cases. So that's, I think, really big and important. I also think that we have a lot of experiments going on with cheap block space about trying to build sort of non-self-referential use cases of crypto. So DeFi has been I take out a loan against my token so I could go speculate on another token. That's all very self-referential. But if I can if we have this, we have DeSci, we have AIX crypto, we have all of these other things that are actually referencing, real world compute resources, data sets that are used for training, discovery and like experimentation in like biology, longevity, life science, like all of these things, then like these self-referential tools actually act as like an amplifier on top of these things. I think it's going to be tricky to bootstrap, but like that's where the future lies.
Yeah, let's sum up this. And yeah, thanks for all the insights and hope you guys have a good day today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.